her ministry within this church. And we pray now that you might give her the words to say. And we pray that you might open up our hearts and souls to the message that she has for us this evening. This we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you. I guess this is the only show in town. That may be your last laugh while I'm speaking. Before I get to my story, I want to bring out some verses in the Scriptures very clearly that occultism is forbidden in the Bible. In Leviticus 19:31, regard not them that have familiar spirits, neither seek after wizards to be defiled by them. I am the Lord your God. Leviticus 26, and the soul that turneth after such as have familiar spirits and after wizards to play the harlot after them, I will even set my face against that soul and will cut him off from among his people. And in Deuteronomy 18:9-14, he's speaking to his people before they go into the promised land. Can everybody hear me back there? When thou art come into the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee, thou shalt not learn to do after the abominations of those nations. There shall not be found any among you who maketh his son or his daughter pass through the fire, or who useth divination, or an observer of times, which is an astrologer, or an enchanter, or a witch, or a charmer, or a consulter of mediums, or a wizard, or a necromancer. For all that do these things and are an abomination unto the Lord. And because of these abominations, the Lord thy God doth drive them out from before thee. I think that's interesting when you think that the people who are in the lands where the Israelites were sent by God blamed the Israelites, of course, for taking their land from them. But God said way back here that he was giving his people this land because of the abominations that went on in that land. These were never acceptable to God. And of course, the verses that I'm giving you do not give you all the bizarre and very wicked stories that there are in the Bible that have to do with this. That the nations around the promised land were very wicked nations. Thou shalt be perfect with the Lord thy God, for these nations whom thou shalt possess hearken to observers of time. Now this was one of the abominations, astrology, and unto diviners. But as for thee, the Lord thy God hath not permitted thee so to do. In the 19th chapter of Acts, as the early church was being formed, we read in verse 19, many of those also who used magical arts brought their books together and burned them before all men. And when I first was converted, one of the very first things that I do, and I hadn't reached the book of Acts yet, one of the very first things I did was to take all of my occult books, and every day for 2 weeks, I had a bonfire in the backyard. I burned them without knowing what the Bible had to say about it. All these practices are part of occultism. Now, this is my definition of occultism. It is the study and the use of supernatural forces in order to develop the mental and the psychic powers for one's advancement. You see, there's a personal gain in this. Otherwise, it wouldn't be done. The dictionary, which I looked up, describes it as hidden, concealed, beyond human understanding, mysterious, having to do with mystical arts, alchemy, astrology, magic, and so on. The word psychic in the dictionary means beyond the natural or known physical processes, apparently sensitive to forces beyond the physical world, a spiritist or spiritualist medium. Those two words are interchangeable. They mean the same thing, spiritism or spiritualism, the supernatural. I have a lot to say, but my problem is putting it all together. Some people believe anything, and some people don't believe anything. And then in between, you have the majority of people who are so easily influenced and swayed by anything that is sensational. And this is a sensational subject. 40-some years ago, when I first became involved in this, it was unpopular and unacceptable, and so those of us who studied it kept it quiet. You know, our best friends hardly knew, and our families, and we were careful to keep those activities hidden. The woman who taught more than 50 faithful followers, of which I was one, often told us, now this was 40 years ago, she told us that when the age of Aquarius came in, everything was going to change. There would be an upheaval. She predicted an explosion of knowledge and activity in the realm of the supernatural that the world had not seen before. Occultism in all of its forms would make an inroad in society that would bring acceptance, in measure, of many things once considered undesirable. There would be liberties unthought of before now. Never way back there did I ever think the day would come when it would be an accepted, a socially acceptable thing to be involved in occultism. And the average person in this country has no idea how much occultism there is behind seemingly innocent things. The other day, I was watching TV, not too closely. I was busy working around the room, and I heard an announcement for some kind of witch activity. And one anchor person said to the other, "Imagine, we used to think that witches were bad. Well, witches are bad. But it has come to be thought that there are good witches. And people will concede that there are bad witches, too. As we were taught in our occult group, there were forces of light and there were forces of darkness. It's all darkness, as I was to find out much later. But we were given this feel that you look out for the bad witches and the bad mediums and the forces of darkness. But there is so much good, and I think that all of us who were part of this group were in it to help mankind. I know that certainly was my own desire. But we were all fools, and some of those people in that group that I was a part of never did find out what the whole story was. But I'm here to tell it to you. All kinds of reactions today to the films, books, and music dealing with psychic matters. Are you aware of this? I'm sure you may see things that you don't pay any attention to. I happen to notice because I know what's behind them. If a famous person comes out with a book on reincarnation, as someone has, it immediately becomes a bestseller. I could spend this whole time talking about reincarnation, but I wouldn't get anything else said. And all I have to tell you is simply this, that in the book of Hebrews, in God's Bible, it says, it is appointed unto man once to die, and then the judgment. There is no second chance. When we studied with this woman, there are different schools of thinking as far as reincarnation is concerned. But the school of thinking that we had was that one soul, as it shoots off from God, which is just a ball of fire, and these little specks shoot off from it all the time, and those are souls, and they begin as little amoeba and little gnats and so on, and the average number of lifetimes for a soul to go through is 3,000. Now, if you would like to, even as I was learning this stuff and accepting it, I certainly didn't want to live 3,000 lifetimes. That's a horrible, horrible thing. But the idea was that while you were living all these different lifetimes, going from the plant stage to the insect stage and animal stage and finally to the human stage, you had to experience every possible experience so that your soul could grow properly. And this is where karma comes in. The things that you would do in any one of these lifetimes that was not good, you had to pay for in further lifetimes. And the good things that you did, you would be rewarded for eventually, perhaps immediately or perhaps not for 500 more lifetimes. But this put an entirely different slant on our perspective as to the suffering in the world. Because if someone was suffering in the world, way back there somewhere in some lifetime, they had brought it on themselves. And it wasn't done harshly. I mean, we didn't think of it in a harsh way, but it just was it made us feel a little bit better that people were not suffering for nothing. There was a reason for it, and when the suffering was over, they would be purified. Now, I didn't really mean to go into reincarnation, but I did want to explain to you that it is a very complicated thinking, and it can change your thinking about everything. It can make you feel better. I had a friend at the time who had a child who was retarded, and when I explained this to her, she just ate it up. She said, well, isn't it wonderful that after this lifetime, this soul will never have to go through that again? And I said, yes, isn't that wonderful? And I really felt that way. Well, it may be wonderful, and it may sound beautiful, but it's not true. When I was younger, and when I got into this, I thought if anything was beautiful and it worked, it had to be right. And that is not the case. And there are a lot of people are gullible that way. They will accept something because it works. But bad things work. Bad things work just as well, just as easily. The thrust of my message, I'll say right at the start, has to do with the reality of Satan and his demons. And all through the Bible we read about the devil, Lucifer, who was a beautiful angel and was cast out of heaven because he aspired to be greater and higher than God. Indeed, he wanted to become God. And he was cast out of heaven, and when he was cast out of heaven, a third of the angels of heaven were cast out with him. And these became his demons. Now, in the studying that I have done since I've been a Christian, I have not been able to determine if demons came from somewhere else as well. I don't know that. And I want to say right now, while I think of it, I don't have all the answers. In fact, loads of answers I don't have, especially as to where occultism today is. But I want to tell you my story, which is a true story, and let you ponder that and see how dangerous this type of thing can be. Jesus refers to the devil as the prince of this world, the prince of the power of the air. He has a vast domain and tremendous powers. 2 Corinthians 11:14 and 15 says, Satan transforms himself into an angel of light. Therefore, it is no great thing if his ministers also be transformed as the ministers of righteousness, whose end shall be according to their works. It would be so much better if Satan, the devil, really were a little devil such as we see caricatures of, with a pitchfork and a pointed tail. That's not the devil. The devil appears in ways that will attract people. The devil doesn't say, in effect, to people, to someone, you just follow me and I'll make you the best, biggest drunkard you ever saw. That's not what he does. The devil, and this is so true in occultism, the devil inspires people to be something. Be something big. Be something wonderful. Be something effective. Have it work. This is what the devil does. He lifts you up with pride. Oh, that was the greatest thing of all, to make you feel that you are so important and so right, and as much as possible to be like God. Well, we're told to be like Jesus, but this isn't the same thing. This is talking about usurping the power of the true God. In the book of Job, we see him the devil, going to and fro upon the earth. And he is allowed, not given, he is allowed great powers to afflict and even cause the death of human beings, which he does to the family of Job. In 1 Peter 5:8, we are told to be sober, to be vigilant, because our adversary, the devil, like a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour. Now, this is no nice guy. This is terrible, really. It's really frightening. Satan has legions of demons who do his bidding. Now, Jesus, we read in the scriptures, did much healing and casting out of demons. In one instance, there were 2,000 demons in one man that Jesus cast out. And he cast them into a herd of swine, which ran off a cliff and into the sea. The film, The Three Faces of Eve, and I don't know, there's been a number of films having to do with all these personalities within one person. Demons. Jesus recognized their existence and cast them out. In the days of Jesus, they were real. Now, why should it be any different today? How could it be so real as we read the Gospels about the devil and demons and not be real today? This is real stuff today. A psychiatrist that I knew some years back, assigned to a mental hospital in Massachusetts, once told me, and he told me what the percentage was, and I can't remember, but it was a good number of his patients were demon-possessed. That was what was wrong with them. They were demon-possessed. And he didn't know how much longer he could work there because it affected him so badly. It's to be in the presence of demons, as you can imagine, would be very, very oppressive, and to have to work all the time with these people. As far as I knew, he had no power to cast out demons, nor was there anyone around that was able to. And he had to suffer the effects of it. Now, the Bible tells us to resist the devil. If we can recognize what is of the devil, then we are responsible to resist it. If I had known all the information that there is in the Bible about this, perhaps I could have avoided what happened to me personally. I had no knowledge of the Bible at all. Even though I was raised a Catholic, we had what we called a Bible. It was a Bible story book, but it did not have the whole Bible in it. It had just highlights of the stories. And so I had I was not armed to be on my guard or to fight this. I did come from a genetic line of psychics. My mother and my aunt read tea leaves and cards, and they were very, very psychic. I had an aunt who worked in a little tea room in New York City, and she read teacups for people, and she was considered very good. So I had that natural tendency. I think also, having been a Catholic, in fact, while I was sort of a nominal Catholic at the time that I got into this, but there's something kind of mysterious about the Catholic Church. And I almost think that it's easier for them to get caught in something like this because they accept that to begin with. I became part of an occult group by responding to an invitation to an astrology class. And the woman who taught us was the leading astrologer in the Boston area. She had a studio in the Brunswick Hotel in Copley Square, and she was very, very well known and respected in her circles. She called herself and advertised herself as a spiritual consultant, or spiritual advisor. And I hate to tell you this, but one of the leading surgeons at Mass General never performed an operation unless he had the astrological information for that patient. And she, the teacher, of course, the astrologer, had his chart in her office, and she would measure the chart of him, his being, with the chart of this person that he was operated on, and she could tell him the minute and the hour to perform that surgery, or if not to perform it. And he was one of the leading surgeons at the Mass General. And I don't know whether his patients thought it peculiar that he wanted to know what time they were born, but this is what he did. And on the strength, there's a great deal of mathematics in astrology, and it's a kind of an exciting study, and it works. People would go to her and say, should my son marry this girl, and give her the information on the birth date. Or every class we would put up a chart of someone. We put up Billy Graham's chart one time. And all the students would dissect that chart. And then she would correct us, as we went along. Or sometimes she'd say, why, that's very good insight, you see. And some of us were more naturally psychic than others. And we thought Billy Graham was for the birds. And we put up Martin Luther's chart. And the first time I went, when this woman knew that I was coming, because the friend who invited me let her know that, she wanted my birth information. And when I walked into that room that night, my chart was up on the big, huge blackboard at the front of the room, and all these students were there examining it. Nobody knew that it was my chart except the teacher and I. She told me that it was I. And this woman did not know me. And as she and her students dissected my chart, I want to tell you, she knew me better than anyone else in the world. She could tell me exactly what I was from that chart. Not just what kind of a home I had and how many brothers and sisters I had and what kind of relationships I had with them and that kind of thing. Whether I was poor or rich or so on. But she could tell me what my inner desires were, what my innermost feelings and reactions to life were. And I had feelings like that, even as a child. And so when I was 23 when she first met me, and I really wanted to do something for suffering humanity. And she picked that up, you see. And this was just the kind of person she was looking for. And I became her disciple. Every one of these 50 people were loyal, faithful disciples who worked hard. She had a library in her studio full of occult books. She trained us to develop our psychic powers and forces. And she told us what kind of books to read and offered them to us and gave us homework. And we would go home and really study these things. She taught us how to develop our minds to concentrate. You know, when you see somebody on TV, as I did the other day, someone weighing about 300 pounds, who lays down almost naked on a bed of spikes, that doesn't look real, does it? I mean, there must be some trick to this. But the way it's done is through absolute, intense concentration. And this is an occult power. And that's just one part. Now, there are psychic centers, one between the eyes and one in the pit of the stomach, one at the back of the head, and others. And she would give us certain yoga All right? Yoga exercises to develop these psychic centers and these psychic powers. You know, we can't have prayers in school, but we have yoga in school. And I want to tell you that yoga is an occult religion. We don't like to hear that. And I wish it were not so, but it certainly is. And I used to read lots of books on yoga. And they are able to do absolutely amazing things because they have developed themselves, their minds to concentrate and their psychic powers to receive. Now, she taught us to meditate. You want to know how we meditated? When we meditated, we communed with other world spirits. That's how we meditated. And whatever else was out there, we just opened ourselves. Just open yourselves up and receive whatever there is. Hey, listen, I wouldn't do that today for anything. Imagine to open yourself to receive whatever is out there, and this is what we did. This was meditation, that kind of meditation. So sometimes when I'm listening to talk shows while I iron, and someone's talking to me about meditating, I'm not talking to me, talking on TV, I wonder. And sometimes if I listen a while, I find out. I can tell what they really mean, whether it's just an innocent little meditation. Sometimes people are just trying to be sophisticated, you know, because it's the fashion to do these things. There's one lady that my husband and I know who's always talking about her vibrations. I feel vibration, and I hope to God she doesn't know what she's talking about. Now, advanced students were taught to read other people's minds, which I was taught, to be able to mind. Now, I don't know how that hits you right off, but we had two salesmen in our class who were there in order to learn how to send their thoughts into the thoughts of their customers, into the minds of their customers, so they could take advantage of them. Have you ever had someone come to the door? I have. Who wants to sell you a vacuum cleaner or a set of dictionaries or encyclopedias or something, and you say afterwards, I didn't know that. I didn't need those. I don't know what made me buy them. Well, I know what made them buy it. Because there are people who actually train themselves to take advantage of people in this way. Now, my teacher, she not only met with us in the classes, but she would meet with us individually and train us individually to her liking. And she told me that if she went into a home and saw a vase on the mantle that she lusted after, she didn't say lusted after, that's scriptural phrase. If she saw an item that she took a hankering to, without saying one word, she would project into the mind of her hostess that she should give it to her. And the woman would come in from getting coffee or something, walk into the room and say, by the way, Isabel, I would just love to give you this vase that I have. And she acquired many, many things, whatever it was she wanted, by doing this. And I never got to do that. As a matter of fact, I had two next steps. That was the next step, and also having a otherworld guide, a spirit guide. I was being groomed, and I was almost ready to receive my own spirit guide instead of going on hers. She had more than one, and she guided us through the information that she received from them. And neither of those things happened to me, and I sometimes think that perhaps if I had continued on the way I was going and had reached that point over by a spirit guide, that might have been the end. I might never have been able to get loose from that. Now, some of these students had their own spirit guides. Some of them were mediums. We had one spiritist mediums who frequently came to our classes. And I had private times with her, too. And she would go into a trance, and out of her mouth would come a deep man's voice. I mean, there was no question that it was not she. And after the thing was over, she didn't know what she said. She didn't have any idea what she said, because she allowed her entire body and mind and mouth to be taken over by this spirit. And this spirit was the one that gave the information. And strangely, I've never been able to understand this. About 2 months before I left that group, I had a time with this spiritist medium, and this man's voice told me that I was on a sinking ship and I should get off. Can you imagine that? How they would work against themselves, so to speak. But I had other very strange experiences. To have a spirit guide was considered a major step in their development. Now, we had been given to us, the whole class, what she called invisible helpers. And then she had another pet name for them, which was astral angels. Now, these were demons, but of course I didn't know that. Neither did anyone else. These were spirit beings that were given to us in order for us to live more effective lives. They did all kinds of favors for us. My husband, who didn't believe, well, I won't say he didn't believe, he didn't want to have anything to do with it. Rightly so. In those days, there weren't as many things in Boston to excite us and to invite us as the Radio Shack and Lafayette Radio Store. And on Saturday morning, he always wanted me to go with him. You know why? Because as we approached, he knew that I could get one of my little helpers to find us a parking space. And it always happened. As a matter of fact, if we drove closer and closer to the Radio Shack, and I couldn't see a single space, and somebody would just pull away, and we would just pull in. He would just pull in there. And Isabel Hickey is the name of the teacher that I had, and I don't mind giving you her name because now she's no longer living. She was in the Brunswick Hotel for 25 years, and never once, she had a home in Watertown, so she had to drive to her studio, which was her profession and her work. Never once in those 25 years did she have to go beyond the front of the building to have a parking space. And there was a music store just underneath the Brunswick Hotel. And sometimes she'd be driving toward and not see a space, and someone would come running out of the music store and get in the car and go, probably just remembering something he had to do or someplace he had to go. And her life was full of fantastic experiences like this, because she had all these beings that were at her beck and call. And so as long as we were studying under her, we had them as well. And I remember the girl next door had a car that she had trouble starting. And I would tell her, I'll come right over, I'll help you out. And I would come and she'd say, oh, but you don't know what's wrong with this car. I said, it doesn't make any difference. And I would call upon an invisible helper to start the car, and the car always started. Or if a window was stuck, or I couldn't find something, or I just had, this was one of the great assets of belonging in this group, that we could call on these beings to do these little favors for us. Every class and meeting was begun with our sitting in the dark, holding hands with the person on either side, and opening with singing the hymn, Have Thine Own Way, Lord. And then we sang in the garden, And also in every meeting, a lovely lady repeated St. Francis of Assisi's prayer, which I learned by heart at that time because she recited it every single time, but now I can't remember. And we sang the Old Rugged Cross. I haven't yet been able to figure that one out, why that was so. And we were given high-level information on the nature of God. We were told that it was like a ladder. And as we progressed up the ladder, we left the lower things behind. Now, evangelical Christianity was even below the lowest rung of the ladder. This was just not accepted at all in her eyes or as she taught. And as we grew spiritually and in knowledge and in power, we left a lot of things behind, and especially in our Wednesday night class, it was on religious philosophy, and we studied all of the religions. And we were free to take whatever part of any of them we wanted, and we were all structuring our own religious position so that we had our own. The person sitting next to us might not have believed something that I did believe, but we were perfectly free to do that. And we were always told, no matter what it is you are, whether you're a Congregationalist or a Jew or whatever, it doesn't matter what you are, you will be that better if you have occultism. This will make it better. You'll be a better Catholic with occultism. And we had very potent prayer times in which we concentrated on individuals in need. And there again, just like the meditation, prayer time was very intense concentration. And we would visualize a person who was in need, a drug addict or an alcoholic or someone who was very ill, and we would visualize that person in the center of the room with Jesus standing next to him or her, because after all, he, we were told, was the greatest medium of all. The greatest psychic powers of all were in Jesus. So he was part of this. And he would be in the center with this person, and then all of us in that circle would concentrate with all of our might on that person being made well and whole. And we saw remarkable things. But it was work. Everyone worked at it. No one took it lightly. Now, all of these students of the occult worked very hard to change the world. Not only were we being trained, but we were instructed to plant seeds as we lived our lives. One lady, very nice lady, taught in a congregational Sunday school, and she shared with us ways that she had figured out to implant occult desires in the children that she taught. The group, by and large, were impressive people. We had a member of the Boston Symphony, several successful artists, a man from Jamaica who owned a building block on Beacon Street and who was ready to sponsor an occult fellowship dedicated to furthering the ideals of the group. He was very instrumental in the growth of the group. Teachers we had, business people, nurses, medical people. This was not a motley crew. It was a very impressive group of people. I want to bring out that the fortune teller or astrologer or medium who is outstanding is the one who has worked very hard behind the scenes. We all know that there are plenty of fakes out there. There are plenty of charlatans, and there are those who are not trying to be fake. They're not trying to be deceptive, but they just don't know their profession. But the ones who really have studied hard and have put the work through and have made the contact with the spirit world, they're the ones that you worry about. Now, when there is a mentalist up on the stage and you are in the back row, and he can tell you what is written on a folded piece of paper in the wallet, in your back hand, in your back pocket of your pants, that's not a trick. That is sheer psychic power. They can do it. Or, if a woman medium goes into a trance before you and from then on speaks in a deep man's voice, you have to believe that there is something supernatural about it. There really are haunted houses, and there really are ghosts. And what makes them real is demons, because there is demon activity. My teacher had an astrology class every Monday evening, and on Wednesday evening we had the religious philosophy, and we were encouraged to apply whatever of it we chose. On Sunday evenings, she had a meeting of only 7, including herself, and the only way one could become a part of this inner group was to be invited to do so because one of them had died, or moved so far away that attendance was impossible. After 5 years, I was asked to become a part of this elite group. After 2 years, on one of these Sunday nights, our leader spoke to us in the dark as we sat in a circle. She told us that each one of us had been chosen by her spirit guides to learn the full meaning of all these studies. 20 years before, she had given herself wholly to Satan with the promise that she would worship and serve him for the rest of her life. And he, in turn, promised her that he would see that she had whatever it was that was important to her, which incidentally was not wealth or good looks or anything like that. What she wanted was power over other people. Never, she told us, never before had she told this to anyone. So her group, her whole group didn't know this. This was just information that she was giving us. She went on to say that she knew that in the end, Satan would overcome God and reign supreme. This was the thing that drove her. She believed in Satan, and that the day would come when Satan would usurp God, and then he would be in that position. Her spirit guides informed her that the time had come for her to be multiplied, and each of us, the 6 others of us, was an acceptable candidate for this great honor. After some time of silence, she turned on the lights and she proceeded to ask each one in turn if he or she chose this path. I was the last one, and before she reached me, every other person agreed. Now, this was new. I know this was new. Everyone was shocked and amazed to hear this. That no one had a clue that this was going to happen. When she spoke to me, I was absolutely shattered. I just couldn't believe this. And when she asked me, I said that I wasn't ready. And I asked her why she always spoke of God if she was following Satan. And she said that Satan didn't mind being called God, that this was a compliment, that every time that she spoke about God, Satan knew that she meant him. She laughed about that because she thought it was only a matter of time before he would indeed be God. And she also said that the reason that she talked about God all the time was, who would be here if I were talking about Satan? She had to present God in order to draw the people. But it was really the devil that she was serving. I wish that I had said no, of course, then. But I had so much confidence in her. I never made a move without without consulting her and without consulting astrology. We just thought that the world is going to become a much more wonderful place because of us, under her direction. And I wish that I had said no, right there in front of everyone. But I told her that I really had to think about it, and I needed a couple of weeks to decide. Well, I never went back again. She telephoned me daily, and she wrote me long letters, which were not all nice. It was very hard for her to believe that she had been wrong about me. Even now, as I think back, it amazes me that with all her psychic powers and her spirit guidance, that she could make this horrible mistake to count on me. Evidently, as I have thought of it since, evidently she had no inkling that I was going to abandon her and her teachings. I knew this woman to always be right. Now, a few months before this, a Jehovah's Witness came to my door one day and said, "Would you like to read the Bible?" Well, I read every other religious book that anyone offered me. And I said, "Sure." And so that Jehovah's Witness came twice a week for 8 months. And that's how I got it. I thank God that Jehovah's Witness came, because that's the person who got me into reading the Bible. But after I had been reading the Bible for 2 or 3 months, I just could not connect what the Jehovah's Witnesses were believing with what was in the Bible. Because they bring you a book that says, look up such and such a verse, Isaiah 14:3, let's say. And I would look it up, and then I would read up from the beginning, and I would read down to the end. And when I read the whole thing, it didn't say that at all. It was just they would just pluck out verses to use like that. And that really angered me, because it was so deceptive. So I certainly didn't go along with them. Now also, right around this time, the local Catholic priest from the biggest Catholic church in town came by one day, knocked on the door, and said, "Are there any Catholics here?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Is there anyone here who ever has been a Catholic?" And I said, "Yes, I grew up as a Catholic." And he said, "Well, but you're not part of the church today?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Well, I have come to restore you to the church." And he came just about every week. But you know what I did with him? I went to the library and I got history books. I got books on the Pope, history, not books that were put out by any church, Protestant or Catholic. They were just plain history books, and I studied these books. And one statement that he made the first time that he came that encouraged me to do this was, he said, "Well, you studied Catholicism as a child. Don't you think that you should be fair and study it as an adult?" And I said, "That sounds fair." So I did it. So I had the materials from the Jehovah's Witnesses, and I had the Catholic priest, and I had the letters and the phone calls from the occult teacher, and then there was a former occult student in the group who had moved to Syracuse, New York, and she had written me that she was wonderfully converted to Christ. And she started sending me mail to show me the difference between what occultism taught, or what the devil taught, as to what God taught in the Bible. I didn't have a Bible at this time. I didn't have one until I started to study with the Jehovah's Witnesses. And when she found out that I had left the occult group, then she really put on the pressure. And I had letters like this, 4 and 5 pages, every day in my mailbox from her. And on every single one of those letters, she wrote the verse in John 14:6. "I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no man cometh unto the Father but by me." I knew it by heart. Not because I wanted to know it, but because I read it in every letter that she sent me. Well, between the time that I left the group and my conversion, the invisible helpers, the astral angels that had before been such a help and asset to me, now turned against me to torment me. I struggled with great anguish of soul for 5 months. I was so full of fear of Satan and of my teacher and the demons. Also, I was terrified of death, thinking that should I die, my soul would just wander in space with all of the spirit forces out there against me. Now, that is terror. I want you to know. And this is what I really believe, that all the spirit guides in the spirit world had turned against me because I had turned against my teacher. I was desperately wishing I could find a safe haven. I thought it was up to me to sift through all the religions that I had studied. That's what I was going to do. I was going to go through, I had studied 14 different religions, which was very little compared to however many there are. And I was going to pick out the things that I could construct my own religion with. Now, if that isn't trying to be God, I don't know what is. You see, I was so well ingrained in that kind of thinking that I just automatically, I thought that way, that this was what I was going to do. And because the Bible had been presented to us as kindergarten stuff, I couldn't seriously consider taking it as my guide, in spite of these letters that I was receiving from my friends. During this time, I was hearing sounds that no one else heard and seeing things that no one else saw. Voices would be speaking in the other room. If I were in the dining room, I would hear voices just outside the kitchen window, and I would go to the kitchen window, and there was no one there. Or I would hear the piano playing in the living room when I was in the kitchen, and the sound would be very erratic, discordant notes that were being played, and I would go into the living room, and as soon as I got in there, the sound would stop, and no one was there. I knew no one was going to be there. It was very, very spooky. But, of course, I was used to spooky things. If I was driving the car, and this happened often, I would suddenly smell a freshly lit cigarette. Now, neither of us smoked in the car. There was not a cigarette smell in our car, but I would get this, or perfume. My husband never wanted me to use perfume, and I never did. So it was not anything that I had on. I would get a strong smell of perfume that I never wore. Where before the demons helped me with all kinds of mechanical disorders, now they caused them. Now it wasn't the lady next door who couldn't start her car. I couldn't start my car. And I was the one who was having windows that were stuck that I couldn't loosen, that had never been stuck before. This is what the kind of thing that demons do. They aggravate, and they torment, and they frustrate, and I couldn't find anything, and certain mail that was sent to me never arrived, things like this. Now, all of this sounds bizarre. Living through it was very unnerving. In the nighttime, I could feel the covers being lifted off me. Now, this was the scariest. I was afraid to go to sleep at night because of that, or I'd feel prodding underneath the mattress. One day, my Bible reading brought me to the 30th chapter of Isaiah. To appreciate this, you must know that Egypt had been presented to us as the place where all spiritual knowledge was kept. From the beginning of time, it was where all the wisdom of the ages was stored. Now, you have to know that so that you will get the full implication of this. In the 30th chapter of Isaiah. Now, as I had been reading the Bible, and I didn't skip anything, I read all the genealogies and all the instructions about cutting the beard a certain way and not drinking this and not eating that and so on. I didn't miss any of it. I read everything, and when I came to Deuteronomy 29:29, it says, the secret things belong to the Lord our God. How about that? The secret things belong to the Lord our God, but those things which are revealed belong to us and to our children, that we might do all the words of the law. And that was the first part of the Bible that really hit me like a cement truck. Because the whole idea of occultism is to know the mysterious inner workings of man and of the heavens and of God and of problems and everything else. It's answers. You get answers to everything, and you feel entitled. But I'll tell you something, even though I sought so hard to find answers to all of my questions and puzzles, and found answers, I was never satisfied. Isn't that something? It just would make me want another answer. I never could just settle down and say, well, now I know. That's it, you know. I never felt like that. It was just always a striving for the answers. Now listen to this. Woe to the rebellious children, saith the Lord, who take counsel, but not of me. I wanted to say this to the whole occult group, because they were always looking for counsel, but they weren't going to God for it. Can you imagine the insult? And there's a verse in Isaiah, I don't know exactly where it says this. It is an insult to God for people to go to a spirit medium instead of to God. That is insulting. So he says here, who take counsel but not of me, and who cover with a covering but not of my spirit, that they may add sin to sin, who walk to go down into Egypt, and have not asked at my mouth, to strengthen themselves in the strength of Pharaoh, and to trust in the shadow of Egypt. Therefore shall the strength of Pharaoh be your shame, and the trust in the shadow of Egypt your confusion. And I was the epitome of confusion at this point. You know, if my name had been written down here, if I had found Tillie written in there, which was not a biblical word, I would not have been surprised. I couldn't believe this was addressed right to me, personally. And then further, in the 7th verse, for the Egyptians shall help in vain, and to no purpose. Therefore have I cried concerning this, their strength is to sit still. Now go, write it before them on a tablet, and note it in a book, that it may for the time to come, forever and ever, that this is a rebellious people, lying children, children who will not hear the law of the Lord, who say to the seers, see not, and to the prophets, prophesy not unto us right things, speak unto us smooth things, prophesy deceit. Wherefore, thus saith the Holy One of Israel, because you despise this word and trust in oppression and perverseness and rely on them, therefore this iniquity shall be to you as a breach ready to fall, swelling out in a high wall whose breaking comes suddenly, and so on. And then, in the 20th verse, and though the Lord give you the bread of adversity and the water of affliction, yet shall not thy teachers be removed into a corner any more, but thine eyes shall see thy teachers. And that's what has happened to me. This woman that we all trusted in. I trusted her with my soul. I trusted her with my entire life. And all of a sudden I saw her for what she was, a disciple of Satan. And from there, and here's another verse, the 21st. And thine ear shall hear a word behind thee saying, this is the way, walk ye in it. And when you turn to the right hand and when you turn to the left. And then, because I knew that verse in John 14 so well, I just tacked that right on. Jesus saying, I am the way. Wasn't that beautiful? It was just wonderful how that just fell into place. Jesus said, I am the way and the truth and the life. Now, I've got to say that all the time that I was reading the Bible, that is not what I wanted to believe in. Because I had been brainwashed into thinking that it was nothing. And it was so unsophisticated and old-fashioned, and that's not what I wanted. But that day, at my dining room table, as I was reading the 30th chapter of Isaiah, and everything came into place, I could see that I had no choice anymore, that God had shown me. I could no longer put this aside. Now, did I quietly bow down my head and give in? No. I became very angry, and I pounded the table with my fist. This was not what I wanted. But after a stormy little session with myself, I did give in, and I hollered to God, all right, if this is the way that I have to come to you, I will. I will take Jesus as my Savior, and I will accept your word, the Bible, for my direction from now on. It's really wonderful when a person sees Christ as God's way and just loves him and desires him and wants to be in God's family. That's wonderful. But you know, God accepts that person, and he also accepts the one who comes to him in brokenness and complete submission and surrender. And that day, God graciously accepted my offer. Before the day was out, as you can imagine, I turned to the Gospel of John and I began to learn about Jesus. To close, I would like to point out that God is always motivated by his love for man. When we trust in him, he brings good out of everything, even in what looks to us as bad. On the other hand, Satan is always motivated by hate. He hates God. He hates man. And he even hates those who serve him. Even after Judas allowed him to use his body to betray the Son of God, Satan did not preserve and reward him, but he abandoned him. He just left him completely, so that he was driven to such despair that he ended his own life. Satan will lose the war with God, but in the meantime, he wants to obstruct and mess up everything that pertains to God and his people. I just want to leave one verse with you that has meant so much to me through all these 35 years. It's in Deuteronomy chapter 29 and verse 29. The secret things belong to the Lord our God. But those things which are revealed belong to us and to our children, that we might do all the words of the law.